Hello and welcome back to Oh God, What Now, the podcast that's thrown its hat into the ring for Director General of the BBC. Our platform includes bringing back Top of the Pops, cloning Robin Day and Brian Walden to do the Sunday Politics show, and you'll only get question time slots in proportion to your number of MPs. So that means one half of Nigel Farage gets to appear on television only once a year. We hope we can count on your support. I'm Andrew Harrison, and on today's podcast, in the fog and chaos of American politics, is Donald Trump beginning to lose? The Republicans are crowing this week after the longest government shutdown in American history ended without any of the concessions on healthcare that the Democrats wanted. But after less than a year of wrecking ball governance, the second Trump administration looks accomplished at destruction, not so much on achieving things. The cost of living keeps rising while the president claims it's failing. His supposed foreign peace deals are proving fragile and superficial. And wild distractions like the White House demolition job and the shit bomb video have not stopped Trump from hitting the lowest approval rating of his second term. Meanwhile, a newly released tranche of emails reveals that Trump knew a lot more about Jeffrey Epstein's sex offending than he ever admitted. The scandal is now washing around the president's cankles. So we're far from the beginning of the end, but are we at the end of the beginning? To talk about it all, we're delighted to be joined by friend of the pod, host of the Fast Politics podcast, and doyen of American politics commentary, Molly Jong-Fast. Hello, Molly. How are you?
I'm good. Let the record show I made a weird face when you said doyen of American politics, but I'll take it. Sure.
Well, I also had hello, Molly. It's so nice to see you back where you belong here, but we can just skate
No,
past that one.
no, I like Diane of American politics. I'll take it.
Okay, so you're in, Mamdani's Socialist Paradise of New York City right now. What's the vibe like? How's the Shakira law treating you?
He's not mayor yet. He just got elected. Give us a little time.
Yes.
We still are being mayored by Eric Adams, who has had all of his legal challenges cleared for him by the Trump administration. So that's where we are at this moment. So we are not yet into Mamdani land, but I would say that it is it's quite a moment here. There's been a real, I think, sea change for Trump over the last couple weeks, and I think it's affected there's been what we say in America, we call it, the technical term is a vibe shift.
Also here to back me up on all this is Oh God, What Now regular, Guardian leader, writer, and optimistic Brighton and Hove Albion fan, Rafael Behr. Hello, Raf. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I've never been accused of being optimistic before with regards to the seagulls or more or less anything else.
Well, you're basically an optimistic guy. We are keeping it all American on this edition because we're actually recording on the Thursday for a change. We don't want to give any hostages to fortune in British politics. But while you're here, give us your very quick take on this bizarre number 10 versus Wes Streeting incident this week with Starmer as an apparent bystander.
The most efficient consequence of this, I think I can deliver, is that we have now definitively shifted from the question of whether to when Keir Starmer leaves Downing Street before the next general election.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's it because I think before this whole episode, it was pretty clear that a lot of Labour MPs just thought, you know what, he's not going to change. He can't do some of the basic things you need to do. He's gone to a place in polling that you don't come back from. He's in the wilderness with no food and no water. In the sort of popularity stakes, but yeah, there was this question of, well, but could it just be worse if you try and remove him? And then you have the briefing, which basically forces that issue and says, you know what? I know you're all talking about getting rid of him, but it would be so much worse if you got rid of him. Where Streeting came out and basically handled it pretty well, fielded the questions pretty well, sort of demonstrated that worst case scenario, there's someone who can just handle a difficult question competently on television. And a lot of Labour people thought, yeah, okay, even that would be better. So, even though I don't like Wes Streeting, you think, yes, we clearly have a prime ministerial operation that can't even do the basics of paranoid bunker politics properly, let alone actually governing. So, I mean, I might be wrong about that, but it feels to me, again, that yes, we said vibe shift in the American context. I feel there's a bit of a micro vibe shift that's gone on in the Labour Party as well this week.
Okay, let's get into it. Is the political tide turning against Trump? Molly, there's a hunger in the world for it to happen. I get out of bed in the morning praying.
For sure.
We grasp at any evidence that we see. But from your vantage point, I mean, I was very cheered that you then said, yes, something has changed. I'm very glad that you didn't say, no, Andrew, the premise for your podcast this week is complete nonsense. Tell us more about that. I mean, what it's not just the off term elections. Is it more than that?
Yeah, for sure. And look, if you want proof that it's changed, think about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Okay.
Hmm.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is a congresswoman from Rome, Georgia. She's in an R plus, I don't know, R plus 20, R plus 30. It's a very red district. She came to fame as a sort of believer of in a lot of these kind of nutty Trumpy conspiracies like QAnon. She is now pushing back against Trumpism. Now, is she doing this because she's a good person? No, none of these people are good people. They're politicians. Okay, so like even the question is a false question, but she's doing this because she sees political opportunity. And when you see political opportunity, that means that this is the distillate. That's why I think what I think, and especially, and you know where you saw it. I mean, there were so many different places where you saw Trumpism start to teeter. A good example is that the day after the election on Wednesday, there were these Supreme Court arguments on tariffs. And it was really interesting because this Supreme Court, our highest court, has just been in the tank for Trump. Everything Trump wants, presidential immunity, he's the God King, anything that he wants. And then all of a sudden, it was like they're pushing back on the tariffs. And you saw Gorsuch and Amy Coney. Those are the two smartest of the Trump justices. And they were pushing back. And it was like that clicked for them that this guy was wildly unpopular, that this guy is term limited out, that this guy is 79 years old. He's the oldest person ever to become president, ever. And that this was what that was. And I think it was a big deal. So there's certainly a lot of different ways in which, and I certainly have been accused of being optimistic, but there are ways in which this thing has really, you really seeing a shift.
I want to ask you about the government shutdown, which has just been shut down. It's just come to an
Mhm.
end. From our perspective, it looks very much just like a handful of Democrats kind of folded. Some of them are calling it a victory because it shows the Democrats are willing to fight. Trump did come out of it badly, but what do you think are the real consequences of the government shutdown? Is this is this pushing the vibe shift? Because obviously, naturally, because they do it with everything, Republicans are claiming it as a victory.
So, I had always been sort of I'd always thought the government shutdown was a mistake, but the base really wanted it. The Democratic base really wanted it. And there was a feeling the Democrats were going along with whatever Trump wanted. Now, they were because they didn't have any choice, right? They didn't control any branch of government. But in the same sense, this administration has done wildly wildly unusual things, anti-democratic things. Like, for example, they passed a bill with foreign aid, and then they used this thing called the pocket rescission to claw back the foreign aid so that this aid package never went through. So you had all these people, they basically have robbed Congress of the power of the purse at every point. And this administration has a guy called Russ Vought in charge of OMB. And Russ Vought is this he's a guy who really wants this presidential power, a sort of unitary executive theory, a president who is a monarch. And so he's done everything he can in a way that Nixon did. I mean, so much of what we're seeing is this sort of reversal, a sort of hearkening back to that kind of thing. So that kind of corrupt Nixonian stuff. So they had to do something. I think the way, again, shutting down the government is easy. It's ending the shutdown that's hard. I think that they should have had a plan for it, and I think that was a mistake.
Do you think it's damaged establishment Democrats then? Because a lot of the talk has been around the excitement of Mandani, the idea that there's another way forward for Democrats, and that like the old guys blew it. Is that a decent analysis of it from your point of view?
I would say this. I don't think that leadership understands how mad the base is. Like Democratic leadership thinks that it's business as usual, thinks that it's 2016, orange man bad, retweet of truth, that kind of like, you can just say Trump is bad and that's enough. And it's not. Like the base is not where they were in 2016. They're not even where they were in 2018. They are enraged. And so I think what Schumer has done wrong here is that I don't think he understands that these guys are all like, there's going to be primaries, there's going to be people losing power, there's going to be a real outrage. And if they don't if they can't show that they see the base, they're going to be fucked. But I do really think that like there's just this is it's not good. Like I think they have sort of failed to meet the moment on this. And like what they should have done is they should have had deliverables, came back with the deliverables, even if the deliverables weren't their dream. Like they were never going to get this funding for Obamacare premiums. It's billions of dollars. The whole point of the Republican Party was this skinny Obamacare repeal. So that was never going to be what it was. They could have but they could have done other stuff. They could have, said like we're getting this or we're getting that. And then they should have I think waited a little bit to reopen the government. I just think the way they did it was sloppy. And like having Angus King up there being like, we pushed back to Trump and it didn't work. Like, no, you idiot. Like if you're trying to protect democracy, that is literally the worst thing you could say. And it's also very clearly not true.
Yeah. I mean, as you were just saying, there's kind of real euphoria when Mamdani won in New York, but also the Democrats that won governorships, so they won a governorship in Virginia and retained one in
Yeah.
New Jersey, they were quite more centrist. We keep getting told New York is not America. The Mamdani thing is not representative. That's not what the Democrats are going to need in order to win. What do you think?
I mean, you hope that the Mandami thing is representative because the guy got ones and twos. He got the low frequency voters that Democrats have been trying to get out. He got those voters. Those Trumpy voters came out for him. Trump got these voters that were not super engaged. And Democrats were like, how do we get them? How do we get them? Okay, here's a guy who has them. And instead of embracing it and being like, well, this is a road to winning, you have Chuck Schumer refusing to endorse, you have Hakeem back and forth. Like it's the mayorship. It's an entirely managerial job. It is not an ideological job. But that ideological fervor connected with the base. So why are you running 10 million miles in the other direction?
Mm. Raf, I mean, over here, Mamdani was also taken as kind of like cast iron evidence that the Democrats, have to turn left, and a lesson for us over here. But like I say, Mickey Sherrill in New Jersey and Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, they're quite a bit more centrist. Is our left getting a bit overexcited by the vibe shift?
Yes, quite. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? For a while, we've had this problem that the right of British politics is incredibly America coded. Everyone sits on X, formerly Twitter, and they soak up all these arguments about what, and particularly cultural arguments, as we're thinking, what should political debate look and sound like? And it sounds like some weird far right libertarian argument in
Yeah.
California rather than actually UK politics. And there's a bit of that on the sort of the TikTok left going on here. And I went by to see people quite seriously and sincerely saying that Zach Polanski is our Mamdani, the leader of the Green Party. I think what he really isn't, and these are very very different. I mean, it'd be like if someone, I don't know, like the left of Dutch politics said, well, this guy Sadiq Khan has like won 3 terms as mayor of London. What does that teach us? Oh, you know what? Not actually all that much. But I mean, it is important. I mean, there's a kind of politics 101 here, I think.
That's a very American thing to say, that,
I
Raf.
know.
You're
Well, yeah,
doing
I'm
it.
trying to be ecumenical here.
CSE, yeah.
GCSE politics here,
Yeah.
which is the and which so Molly alluded to there, which is he's a young, charismatic guy who could do good viral content, but also had a strong ground game and could make an argument and could sort of meet voters a little bit where they were, with his electorate. That was also true of a lot of other people in this election. And you kind of think, and again, you look at the problems that Keir Starmer has, and think, well, yeah, if there are very basic fundamental things about communication and being plausible and connecting with people that your candidate doesn't have, you're in trouble. And if he does have them, that's an advantage. And actually, I mean, in this respect, I actually have a question for Molly, because it does seem that the sort of the the clever key that the Democrats had in these elections to sort of unlock all sorts of different places was, under this umbrella of affordability, right? You could basically Mamdani could do that in a Mamdani coded way, but you could also do it in a Virginia coded way, in a Georgia
Mhm.
coded way. Um, and I just wonder, it's a sort of perennial question, but in the presidential election, there were attempts to say, look, Trump is a danger to democracy. Actually, he's a real this is a sort of a threat to the constitutional republic.
Mhm.
And actually, it turns out people felt much more strongly about the price of eggs than they felt about that. Maybe that's a bit of a crude generalization. Now it seems that Trump's incumbent, he hasn't solved inflation, affordability is an issue for him. But is there also any actual purchase that oh no, look, he really is a threat to the constitutional republic? I mean, he's got a paramilitary organization kidnapping people off the streets. He's breaking the law.
Yeah. No, no. I mean, I think part of why he got so why his polling is so bad, why he got so knackered, why there's this sense in which this is unsustainable is because I think there's the people do see that, and there's clearly a discourse about that around that. The thing I would say that I think is important to realize too about the New York election, which is something that I'm not seeing people take a uh the lesson from, and I think they should, which is Cuomo was a terrible candidate. He didn't want it. He wasn't interested. He was given millions and millions of dollars by people who wanted him to be mayor more than he did. And ultimately, as Democrats have done this before. They've run candidates who are bad candidates because they think they're famous or because they think the base likes them or because, and like that is, I mean, think about like Mike Dukakis to go to Kerry to Biden. Like they have run bad candidates because they felt that it was like Biden I mean Biden was even at Biden's very sharpest. He was dumb and inarticulate. Okay, even at his most even at his when he was firing on all eight cylinders, he was still he could say the kind of stuff he said was the kind of gaffes he made were horrific. So part of it is also candidate quality. Like you had a handsome, charismatic candidate who stayed on message and who campaigned and who didn't do anything crazy and who, I remember he was somewhere and a journalist said, "Well, Donald Trump says that he's more handsome than you are. And what do you say about that?" And he said, "I believe in free buses."
Right. So this is I find this really interesting because I mean Trump at his most powerful, one of his sort of evil genius of him is this ability to okay, he's got his hardcore base who believe him. There's charisma that works with them. I find it repugnant, but obviously I'm not the target audience. But also even beyond that, both in 2016 and then again the second time round, he has this ability to sort of command the subject and make its topicality to say like, well, we're just going to talk about my thing, and then the Democrats running around going, but the thing that he's talking about is completely mad. It's like too late, you're talking about his thing again, and now you're fighting on his ground. And I wonder if that sense of like what sort of the nature of his popularity is somehow contained in that sense that he's just got this gravitational field and everyone's in an orbit around him. And is the vibe shift that you're talking about and what you've just described in terms of Mamdani's capability, is that about just breaking the tractor beam? Like we can talk about our issues and our stuff and it doesn't all have to be on his terms.
So I know that Trump likes he doesn't like Mondani, but he sees the talent and he's threatened by it. And I know that he's having this kind of complicated reaction to it because I've heard that from people inside his world. So I think game recognizes game, right? Like he's talented, he sees other talented politicians. I mean, I hate to say he's talented, but he is talented. Look, the thing about American politics, and this may not be true about British politics, I don't honestly know, is that we are suckers. And so we like charismatic leaders, and ultimately it's often to our detriment Sometimes not. Sometimes you have a Bill Clinton who is charismatic and is able to govern, or an Obama. But we also have a Donald Trump and a Richard Nixon, and and if you look at and at the end of the day, it's candidate quality. And I don't even mean quality. It's like quality is almost ironic, right? It's candidate charisma. And I think the real lesson from Mondani is not not I think wh- what the media industrial complex always gets wrong is that they think it's about policy, and none of this in America, at least none of this is about policy. Right, it's about how the politician makes you feel, and it's such a mistake. I mean, certainly there are ways to use policy, but, like, at least for the last Donald Trump will probably have passed one piece of legislation in 4 years. So policy ain't what's going on here.
It was a big, beautiful piece of legislation, though.
That's right.
Well, Molly, we too are suckers. I don't know if you heard about a couple of crazy guys called Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage.
No,
We
I
are
haven't heard
suckers
of
for that
them.
kind of bullshit
Yeah.
as well. But while we're talking about the power of charisma, I mean, we've just seen this huge dump of further Epstein emails, which reveal that Trump spent hours at Epstein's house with one of the victims.
Thanksgiving after he
Was
got
it Thanksgiving?
arrested, like
Jesus, that's even.
yeah,
Is
Thanksgiving.
it worse or I don't know. It's all horrible. He knew about the
Yeah.
girls. Epstein emails his trafficker, Ghislaine Maxwell, and says, "The dog that hasn't barked is Trump. A victim spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned." Now, if this had landed at the beginning of this cycle, you would imagine it might have been the thing that blew Trump up. Is the because charisma and fealty to charisma is a sunk cost job, isn't it? You like the guy, you stick with the guy no matter how bad it gets. Are we reaching a breaking point with that yet, particularly over Epstein?
Look, the game of keeping democracy is a game of centimeters, not inches. And it's also the other thing that I think is you do at your peril is this idea that this will matter or won't matter. We don't know yet. I mean, I certainly think that there's a lot of information here, and it's really damning. And I think Donald Trump has behaved in the way a guilty person behaves, right? Like Todd Blanche went to see Ghislaine. Ghislaine got moved to a nicer prison. Like it just seems like, and you'll remember that the birthday book story, like Wall Street Journal has the birthday book story, the about the drawing comes out, Todd Blanche goes to see Ghislaine, Ghislaine gets moved. Clearly there's a certain amount of deal making going on behind the scenes. So it's hard for me to imagine, but you just need to take 5-10% of the base. You just need to do enough unpopular stuff. And none of this happens in a vacuum. So you have the Maxwell stuff and right and the Epstein stuff. And then you have the inflation, right? Trump said he was going to be president and was going to lower the price of bacon. He had a whole thing about bacon. He was going to lower the price of bacon. He was going to lower the price of everything. So instead, he engages in a trade war that makes everything more expensive. So, and the polling is now 70% of all Republicans blame Trump for the economy. Like, when you're the president, you get the blame. So, I think that all of this in combination with each other will is not good for him.
Yeah, I mean, interesting what you were saying. He's not behaving like an innocent man. They're discussing the email dump with Lauren Boebert in the Situation Room, the most secure room in America.
Yeah.
You don't. That's not what an innocent person does. It seems. I want to ask you about the other thing that is just those who are not on the base cannot comprehend how it's accepted. The obvious physical and mental deterioration of the president, his increased detachment, his flights of fancy. We knew he talked in word salad. The weave, the way he rambles, he sees it as a strength. The glorying in ignorance, he sees it as a strength. But it's all those kind of those inches being lost out by more people recognizing that this guy is, they're having to label the Oval Office so he knows where it is. That kind of level of cognitive deterioration.
I mean, it's hard to know. He had a once yearly physical twice, right?
Yes.
So he did have a second physical, and then he was in the physical, it said he had advanced imaging, And the admin was like, "Oh, that's nothing. That's nothing." And then he was like, "I had the best MRI ever."
Yeah, it's not a competition. There
Right.
isn't a leaderboard.
Right. But it's also like we were told it was nothing, and then he said it was the best MRI, and it's his second physical in 1 year. So, like, I don't know. I mean, he certainly doesn't look good. The fact that they were releasing that thing about his ankles is for an administration that models itself on North Korea, for them to be like, yeah, the ankles look, that's a this. That's a tell, I think, a little bit. But again, like all of this is like I don't know. I think it's important to remember like this is the oldest person to ever have become president. He's definitely was at one point sharper than Joe Biden, I think. I mean, not smarter, but a better speaker, a little more tuned in. But he's clearly quite old. I mean, anyone who, like this is not a contest, like this is what's going to happen to all of us. So I don't know exactly where this goes, but it's certainly there's no way that like that's why the Steve Bannon stuff about like Trump's third term. It's like yeah. When he's 83, people are going to want to change the Constitution so that they can have this wildly unpopular guy get in a third term.
Well, that
Well, this
raises
is like
that raises this really interesting question, doesn't it, about sort of Trumpism and MAGA as a project, as opposed to Trump himself? Because he believes. I mean, he obviously has a lot of very powerful, intuitive prejudices about stuff that he's always sort of believed, and the tariffs are sacred.
Mhm.
And there's all sorts of there is a world view there, but actually, we're thinking. I'm looking back at the whole sort of Project 2025 stuff, which attached itself to him. He was a very good vehicle up front driving that stuff, but they were much more focused, sort of clinically acute, ideological people behind that sort of stuff. And that
Mhm.
when it was expedient, he distanced himself from it. Um, now it seems like there's an online tracker suggests they basically about 50% of that
Yeah.
has now been realized. You've got total executive monarchy effectively. I mean, you say the Supreme Court that might be pushing back a little bit. There might be bits of the checks and balances still functioning. You've got ICE as your sort of personal anti-immigrant and support militia. You've sent troops onto the streets of US cities. What do you think there's a particularly Trump bit of the project that has yet to be fulfilled apart from winning a Nobel Prize? I mean, is there something that he actually really wants to do with the rest of his term that's his, rather than something that mad far-right ideological Republicans are sticking onto him and going in his slipstream? If that makes sense as a question.
So the question is like, where does the desires of Donald Trump and the desires of like the Koch brothers and Leonard Leo and that crew diverge?
Yeah, what is this project within his term, assuming he has only this term to
Just to,
run?
I think his goal has always been to make money and stay as long as possible and avoid prosecution. Right. I mean, he's got three things he wants: make money, stay as long as possible, avoid prosecution. And I think that then that you have different fractions. So you have the heritage crew, and those people, you have two sort of sections with heritage, right? You have the people who are the make money, make government small, don't pay taxes crew. And that's the Koch brother. There's only one alive now. And that crew, and that's sort of a, a group. And then you have the Christian nationalist crew. And then you have the tech bros who are sort of in that they basically I think they have that same kind of Koch brothers, like don't pay taxes, don't give the poors anything, etc. The Christian nationalist group, I think, has, if you look at who is in the Trump White House right now, you got Stephen Miller as the chief of staff. You got Russ Vought. Those are both like very involved in this sort of Christian nationalist anti-democracy kind of coalition. And then you have Susie Wiles, who's more of like a rich people don't want to pay taxes crew. And I would say I don't I don't think Trump is particularly detail oriented. I mean, I think that's the understatement of the year. And I don't think he's particularly ideological, right? Except for the fact that he doesn't really care about anything but himself. Uh, but I think that I don't think he has big things on his mind for, besides his power. And I think of him as sort of a very kind of id based actor.
So, Molly, is within that world, it looks again from this side of the Atlantic like that's also kind of starting to crack a little bit. You mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene going rogue. The idea that like it's only really Trump holding these guys together, like the kind of magnet at the center of the at the center of the ball of iron filings or
Right.
whatever. Am I right in thinking that it's looking like cracks are emerging in this? We've already talked about the coalition of voters is like not showing up and not interested. Are the cracks appearing in the coalition of ideologues and campaigners and prologues and fascists?
Well, you think of this as like a broad tent, right? You think of the Democratic Party as a broad tent, a broad coalition, a big tent. But this really is a big tent, right? It's like, because you have in this group, you have Zionists and you have anti Semites, right? You have a Tucker Carlson who's or Candace Owens, that crew, we know where they go. And then we have like people like Sheldon Adelson, who's dead, but Marion Adelson, there's some of the biggest donors to Trumpism are Zionists.
Yeah.
So that is a very tough coalition to keep together. You have people who are radically Christian nationalists and don't believe in gay anything. And then you have Peter Thiel. So I don't know how you keep, it Democrats, big party, big tent, okay. You got the left, you got the center, you got the center left. But here you have literally people who do not believe gay people should exist and gay people. You have literally people who are, don't believe Judaism is real or Israel, or, you have, like a thing that's going on right now is you have Nick Fuentes trying to get Charlie Kirk's followers. Now, Charlie Kirk was sort of on the fence about Israel. Nick Fuentes is basically on the fence about Jews' right to exist.
Well, he's a Holocaust denier, isn't he?
100%. He's a huge anti-Semite. So the point is, like, it's hard. I don't know. This is such a radically divergent coalition with many different interests that are, many of which are contrary to the other.
All right, so this raises, for me, a really interesting question. Obviously, there's going to be some positioning for succession. There's this huge pile of MAGA energy out there that ambitious people are going to want to capture. But also, you've got a bunch of people who currently, it's a kleptocracy as well, right? People who are close to power, they can enrich themselves. They have business contacts. It seems to me that what the combining, the unifying powerful incentive here is to not lose, because if you get ejected from power, you end up going to jail. You're going to get indicted, and that means going back to the sort of the premise of the conversation about whether something has really shifted. Like, we're now looking into the midterms. Like, I what on earth is going to incentivize these people to have a fair election? Nothing. Surely the one combining, sort of galvanizing thing that will bring these people together is to try now to go all out to rig the system to make sure those midterms can't be fair.
I think you're right. And in fact, on election night, I thought, oh, they're going to fucking rig the midterms. That's what I thought. I thought, these people know they can't win now, and they are going to rig the midterms. So I think they're going to try as much as they can. The only bit of good news, and I think bit is maybe a little overly generous, they're very stupid. Like, these people are quite stupid, and it, even the smartest of them are pretty dumb. So, like, Trump 1.0 unraveled mostly because Trump was just undisciplined and stupid, right? Like, pandemic came, they had fired all the pandemic people. He had these press conferences. He kept saying crazy stuff. Finally, he was like, you should let the light in the body. And everyone was like, oh, fuck, right? Like, this guy is cooked. And so I think, look, there's some chance that we don't have free and fair midterms and this American experiment goes kaput. I think what will happen then, and again, I don't know, but I think there'll be more likely a Brexit-like soft secession, which would be a fucking disaster for the American economy. But I don't think you can do, I don't think Trump has the political will to be able to capture the entire country. And California is enormous. And, there's enough states that are affluent and enough leaders that are ambitious, so that I don't think uh it'll go like that. But this is gonna be hairy. I mean, I think the next year is gonna be really scary.
Is there any life at all in the twitching corpse of the kind of Lincoln Project, never Trump moderate Republicans?
I think the problem is that the problem is that the thinking there was that Republicans would become never Trump. And I think that was probably the mistake. Like, the never Trumpers will become conservative Democrats, and MAGA will go on to be its own thing. And I don't think you can, like, we'd all love a world where the Republican Party goes back to Jeff Flake. I mean, I would love it too. I don't see it happening, but maybe it does. I mean, it's not impossible. Look, there's an off ramp for these guys, but it's hard for me to imagine if you look at the people who consider themselves to be the inheritors of Trumpism. They tend not to be very Jeff Flakey. They tend to be much more Charlie Kirky.
Are you listening to our companion podcast, The Bunker? If not, you should be. We do one story each weekday morning, the one that really matters, and we dive deep so you get proper, useful takeaways. On the edition that's out today, probably the most useful of all, what's going to happen in 2026? The Economist is about to publish The World Ahead, its annual guide to what's coming down the pike for next year. And on today's Bunker, Seth Tevo talks to its editor, Tom Standage, about the many, many ways the world can get worse and the few in which it might get slightly better. Here's a taster. Follow the link in the show notes to listen to the whole thing after you've finished listening to Oh God, What Now?
I was a little surprised by your last couple of forecast points, which are really to do with health and well-being around sporting events and Ozempic.
Exactly. What we have next year, we have the World Cup, and it's going to be an interesting one because it's being co-hosted by the US, Mexico, and Canada, who are not getting on terribly well at the moment. They've got to also renegotiate their trade agreement next year. But yes, the sporting event that I'm kind of going to be watching with interest is the Enhanced Games, which are happening in Las Vegas, and they're also known as the Doping Olympics. This is a sporting tournament where the athletes are not just allowed, but they're actually encouraged to use performance-enhancing drugs. And there are cash prizes on offer if they manage to break existing world records using drugs. And so there's a huge debate about the ethics of this and the safety of this, and if anyone involved in it should be allowed to kind of have anything to do with the rest of the sporting world. And so there's a big argument about that. But I think that also connects to my final point, which is about the weight loss drugs. So Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, all of these. A second generation of these drugs are coming in 2026 that last longer, so you can just have jabs once a month instead of once a week, that are more effective. They ensure that the weight loss comes from fat and not muscle. And they're going to be cheaper versions as well because the patents expire in many parts of the world. So I think this is going to, this expansion of access, which is very, very good because these drugs also have lots of other health benefits. They seem to reduce dementia. They seem to be good for heart disease. They reduce compulsive behavior. We'll get more evidence about that
But
next
there
year.
are also questions about side effects, the pancreas and so forth as well.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll get more evidence on those too. But you're going to have a wider range of options, I think, to choose from if you want to use these drugs. But I think the other thing we're seeing, we already see this, but we're going to see, I think, a big intensification of the debate about the kind of ethics of using these drugs. Are you required to tell your family and your friends? Is it cheating? And I think this extends the ethics of the debate about performance enhancing drugs to a far wider group than just athletes and bodybuilders.
Let's have a think about a slightly longer view. Has what Trump and MAGA have done to America permanent? Have they defaced the country in a way that can't be undone?
Yeah.
Or if it's going to be fixed, how are we going to fix it? I mean, Molly, every presidential era has its defining moment. Reagan is like, tear down that wall, Mr. Gorbachev. Carter bungles the Iran hostages. Bush is 9/11. Trump 1 is January the 6th. For Trump 2, it seems to be troops on the streets. The thing you thought you'd never see and the thing you can't forget is like troops tear gassing a kid's Halloween parade because they've seen a Mexican gardener somewhere. Has he effectively permanently changed that relationship between the American people and the state in that now the government is something you will have grown up fearing?
I don't know. That's a big question. I mean, I definitely think he has irrevocably harmed our Constitution and our, it was like there were a lot of lazy things that we did as a country to get us here, like uh not revoking emergency powers after 9/11. Like ICE is a creature of 9/11, right? We created this customs and border patrol after 9/11. So like it was meant to end terrorism, not to be a private militia for the president. And a lot of this sort of laziness that he was able to pick up on and exploit, I think is will have to be disassembled. And I also think, and I think this is the biggest problem, is I do not think that I do not think Chuck Schumer is the man for this moment. With Senate Democrats are gonna, if they win back power, and it's gonna be fucking hairy. It can't be another 4 years of Biden. It cannot be another we respect norms and institutions too much to like do anything to protect American democracy. And I think that that means that if you are if you've been in leadership for too long, like it's over.
See, yeah, this raises a really interesting dilemma that, as far as I see it. I mean, you have the obviously the constitutional guardrails that have either been torn down or have turned out to be completely ineffective. It looks like
Yeah.
Congress, and I was very interested in what you were saying earlier about the sort of gerontocracy of the senior Democrats, just thinking somehow they can still do some sort of bipartisan deal like it's the old politics, and not understanding that the Democratic base is looking at this going, no, this is actually what we call collaboration. What the actual fuck
Yeah.
are you doing?
Yeah.
But there's also, so that's the institutional side of it. And then there's also the sort of the corrosive, the tone of it. I was seeing something the other day where someone asked the White House press secretary, like, who cancelled the Putin Trump meeting in Hungary? And the White House press secretary goes, your mom did.
Yeah.
And there's this sort of trollism in the
Yeah.
idiom and the style of it.
Yeah.
And that raises this
Yeah.
question, like, and you have there's on the one hand the kind of norms are important, and there's they go low, we go high, the Michelle Obama edict. And you also have sort of the Gavin Newsom model, which is like, no, you go in hard. Like, this is basically this is a contact sport now, and the whole tone of it's changed. And I don't know, it seems to me there's a genuine dilemma there about you can't just sort of represent the better politics while you're repeatedly getting kicked in the groin. But if you go into a competitive groin kicking competition with people who are really, really enjoy it more, you end up kind of losing. And I don't quite know how you navigate that.
I mean, you have to be smarter than they are. And what you're seeing with the ranking member of oversight, Robert Garcia, in the House is that they're being smarter than Trump is. They're getting that information out there. They're having press conferences. They're pushing Epstein, Epstein, Epstein. And what you're seeing in the Senate with that group of 10 senators holding press conferences being like, why we did it, is that there are people who are not smarter. And like, it's just a really great example of how Senate leadership is falling the fuck apart. And I know he's going to call me and yell at me, but like, my man is not the man for the job. Like, it's time for Chuck to go. It's time for leadership to go. This is it. They have to go. And I think it's real. And I think that they can't handle it anymore. And like, that's what we're seeing. And it's not, this was not, I mean, he says like, this was how I could hold together the caucus, but the way they voted, it's clear that they were the people who voted yes, were the ones who weren't up for reelection or from more conservative states. So leadership must have known that this was how it was going to go. There's just no way otherwise.
Molly, I want to wrap up by asking you about what the Trump years have done to American culture,
Yeah.
because the president is not like our prime minister. You've always respected your president, respected the presidency. We regard our prime minister as just like a hireling, somebody to do a job. It's, we would respect the Queen or the King. We've separated those roles. You would make, you make movies about protecting the president and so on. It now seems like anachronistic, the idea that anybody would treat the president as this kind of embodiment of the nation. Has that gone now? Can you not like make a Harrison Ford movie where the president's a hero?
Can you not make a Harrison Ford movie where the president's a hero? Not right now, but maybe
Yeah.
someday. I mean, also like the whole idea that they're politicians. None of these people are heroes. The The
Yeah.
idea that you would want any of these people to be, you don't even want them to be heroes. Like, you
Yeah, I know.
just
We know
want
that.
them
And
to
that
be
you,
effective and craven. I don't
but in
want them
America,
to
like the
not
idea is
complete
that,
and utter morons. That's all I want. Craven, effective, not totally stupid.
which is what we try to have in Europe, like generally speaking,
Yeah,
somebody can do the job, but you don't want them to be, they're not your god, they're
yeah,
not the queen.
yeah.
But it's like America has always treated the president as if they're more than that. They've got to be the embodiment of the shining city on the hill, etc., etc. Has that gone?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
I guess the other aspect of it is that one of the roles of the president was almost like, this is somebody we can teach kids to look up to. That this is like, there's a good man, and it's always a man, and he's worth listening to as an example. And now you've had like 2 generations of kids who've grown up with the world's biggest asshole has been the president, right? That's the guy in charge, and the lesson is assholes win.
I mean, I think the lesson is that voters like charismatic candidates, and that Democrats need to be more effective.
Well, I mean, this has been really fascinating and also kind of slightly optimistic, Molly, because I was expecting you to begin the podcast by saying, no, sorry, Andrew, you're hopelessly optimistic. Trump's iron grip remains, and he's going to be president. He's going to be like Nixon's head in a jar in Futurama, president till the end of the universe. And actually, you've really cheered me up. Are you feeling cheered up yourself a little at the moment?
No, because I'm worried about, I have other problems, but I do think, I mean, I do see that things are not what they were even 3 weeks ago. Like that this is not how they wanted it to go. And that's the good bit of news.
I'm going to ask you one last thing, just purely as putting a bet out there. From the supporting cast, from the Hegseth, RFK, Naomi, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, who's going to be the first one to go down, do you think?
I think Kash Patel. I don't know if you saw, there was reporting in the Wall Street Journal about him and the jet.
Yeah.
I think he's a man on an island. I don't think he has anyone. Like, his thing is, if he sucks up to Trump, that Trump will let him get away with stuff. But I think the fact that this stuff is coming out, it's being leaked, like, you don't see anyone where they're really actively working behind the scenes to undermine them like they are with Kash Patel. That's my guess.
He's the one I've got in the pool. Personally offended me by wearing a Liverpool FC tie to hearings.
Yes.
We don't want him. Get out of Anfield, J. Edgar Loser.
J. Edgar Loser. That's really good. I like that.
And that's the end of the show. So let's have our escape routes, the books, TV shows, new music, movie, theatre, whatever, any cultural distraction to help us cope with the politics of it all. Rafael Behr, what have you got?
So can I do 2 cheekily?
Go on, then.
Very quickly. For complicated reasons, I decided to try and reread Moby Dick. And it's long and it could use an edit. Is my hot take on Moby Dick, but still, yeah, great story. But actually, the thing that seems to be giving me more escape is satisfaction. Is a musical collective called Scary Pocket, who basically do kind of funk and soul cover versions of just sort of pop classics, and some of them miss and some of them really hit. There's a particularly kind of loud, groovy, funky soul version of Rocky Raccoon by the Beatles from the White Album, which shouldn't work and really does. So that's an actual recommendation. Obviously, Moby Dick's a recommendation too, but yeah, there are shorter, easier books to read out there.
Well, there you go. You don't get funk and soul recommendations from any. You don't get this. The rest is politics, do you? And Molly, how about you?
Susan Cheever's book about her father.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, All the Men Wore Hats. It's really good.
What's so incredible about it?
It's just a great book about writing and creativity and short stories and the New Yorker and the 1950s. It's excellent.
Fantastic. Well, mine is Pluribus, the new Vince Gilligan science fiction series on Apple TV Plus, starring Ray Sehon. And the gist is, overnight, all humans' minds are linked. They essentially become one person with one personality. Everybody knows everything. Everybody can do everything. Everybody is living as a hive mind, except one fantasy author called Carol, who is a bad-tempered, heavy drinker. And it's a tragedy, it's a comedy, it's a strange exploration of what it means to be an individual. And I think the thing that everybody's missing about it is it's actually about women's rage and what happens when the entire world is expecting you to keep calm when you can't. And it's on Apple TV Plus now, Pluribus. And that is the end of the show. Thank you, Molly Jong-Fast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael Behr.
Thank you.
Listeners, thanks for listening. An extra special thanks if you're listening via Patreon. It's kept us going for nearly 8 years now. Your crowdfunding contributions are much appreciated. If you're not a member or supporter yet, then you can make a small contribution every month and you'll keep us in good shape and you'll get the warm glow of having supported independent podcasting. You'll also get every edition early and ad-free. Follow the link in the show notes to find out how to support us. Our appreciation would be limitless. Thanks for listening or watching. We'll see you again at the end of the week.